Houston Cougars, a furious comeback to knock off Duke and advance to the national championship game.
Here is Zion Chris, big hole, open sesame. Zion Chris, wow, the 72-yard house call.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to Scout Home Podcast, back on the joyous occasion of another Cougar football win that we're going to talk through here tonight. Your, once again, not for the first time, but still very enjoyable, number one Houston Cougar men's basketball team played a game since we last recorded. Got a couple to come that we're going to talk about here, including, I would say, by a wide margin, your stiffest non-conference test, and was still a very young season to date. Plenty of other Cougar stuff to talk about. Not a football game to come, but we've got some bye-week thoughts here as well. Bobby, how are you feeling? You have the hoodie on, so I assume it's finally cool temperatures where you at. Those of us hashtag blessed enough to live in the Mojave Desert have been getting at least we'll call it a very dry fall for about a month or so. How you doing, friend?
Good, man. Yeah, the temperatures kind of dropped the last couple of days. It was like 70 today, but it was super windy, so you had that kind of bite in the air. But it's supposed to get back up to like 78 tomorrow, so it's not a huge improvement there. But perfect fall weather. It finally is starting to kind of feel like football weather, even though football's almost done and we're in basketball season. But yeah, everything's going good, man. Feeling good. Cougs get the win on Friday night, win the first ever space game, or they gave the Central Florida Golden Knights their first ever loss in the space game, so that's always fun to kind of have that over that school in Orlando as well.
No doubt. So mention it quickly here, like I always do at the top, patreon.com/SH podcast. If you like the work that Bobby and I do on a weekly basis, we'll have our first men's basketball premium episode. In addition to this one, that will always be free for you, the wonderful listeners of our show, and our weekly football react episodes, which we've also been putting on that feed. If any of that, plus the idea of supporting the work that we do as the internet's longest running Houston Cougar sports podcast sounds good to you, please go to patreon.com/SH podcast. Please also, if you haven't done so already, leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to or watch this podcast. And as my co-host has been saying here, I'm going to repeat it here at the top. Tell a friend. If you have a Cougar friend, Cougar tailgate buddy, that we talk about the Cougs here. And we very much enjoy it and try to cover the athletic department as a whole. Also going to mention our network friends at the 1012 Network, the 1012 podcast that yours truly was on this past weekend, talking a little Cougs, talking a little Big 12 football as well. TEN12 Network, wherever you do social media and listen to podcasts. So for the first time and not the last time in this current athletics year, we will lead with Cougar men's basketball tonight, which is no knock on Cougar football, which had that win that we mentioned at the top. But considering we have a very big game this coming weekend, we agreed that gives the Cougar Hoopers just enough juice to be tonight's lead topic. Since we last recorded, we also have one more full game in the books to talk about, and sandwich in between a home date with the historically punchy mid-major as well. We'll lead with the one game that has been played since our last podcast, a 65-48 win by your Cougars over a pesky Towson team. In the broadest terms, I think you could look at the two results from the two games that have been played so far as we sit here Tuesday night, the 18-point win over Lehigh in the opener and a 17-point win over a better Towson team from Saturday. And you can see something that looks like progress. And I don't think I'd entirely disagree with any assessment of progress because Towson is a much better team than Lehigh. Don't want to overstate what they are, but they are basically the only mid-major out there who won their league last season and returned their two all-conference guys, including the CAA preseason player of the year, Tyler Tejada, who the Cougars did a good job against on Saturday. But you also can't look at these two games and not see a Cougar team here in early to mid-November that hasn't exactly figured everything out. And the good news, you don't award a national championship in early to mid-November. The basketball season is a marathon, not a sprint. Bobby, I'm getting all the cliches out of my system here. And save for, getting some nice resume wins, you're not really competing for the important stuff yet in the first month or so of the season, and this very much looks like a team that's still figuring some stuff out. But what were your takeaways from the Towson game, Bobby?
Yeah, man, you kind of said it there, kind of a punchy um, non-con game here, a game that, heading into the game, we said you should win this one, but they were a little bit better than you might have thought just by kind of looking at the name. Um, I think looking back at the game, a couple of things kind of stood out to me. First was the rebound numbers. Not to go negative with a team that is the AP #1 team in the country.
It's notable though. It is a notable takeaway.
Yeah, Towson tied the Cougs on the glass, which is not something you really expect from a U of H team, especially playing a team like Townsend. It's very rare that this team gets tied on the boards, and this was absolutely a time where you saw that. And it's just something you might want to pay a little attention to as we move forward. Not saying that it's going to be a big problem or that I'm panicking over it or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. But it's definitely something that, kind of looking back at the box score, maybe in the game I didn't recognize it as much, but I think the thing that I did recognize in game was 9 offensive rebounds by Townsend. That's something that cannot happen. You can't give up 9 to Townsend, and you really hope that you're not giving up even more to better teams. You're about to play a really good Auburn team. In Big 12 play, if Townsend can get 9, what does that tell you about the rest of the what the Big 12 could do getting on the boards? That's one of the things that has been a huge calling card for this U of H team, is getting extra possessions by out-rebounding the opponents. You go down, you get all the boards on their end, and then you get extra shots during your on your side of the board. And if you're giving up 9 offensive rebounds, that's the difference in a 3-point Big 12 game versus a Texas Tech, versus an Iowa State, things like that. Those are the things that make a difference. Again, not saying that I'm panicking. Could have been a bad game. You got lots of freshmen out there. It could happen, right? That these are the growing pains that you kind of talked about, right? But at the same time, it is something to just kind of keep your eye on. I also think this was a very interesting game for Sinak. He shot 1 of 8, including 0 of 3 from 3-point land. But in not wanting to be negative, he had 13 boards. And really, it's kind of funny if you were to build a guy in the Samson lab of what your big man would do. He'd probably have 7 or 8 points, and he'd be able to bring down 13 boards. That just feels very much like a Samson lineup by a big man there. So I think maybe another interesting thing that we keep seeing is the rotation, and how it develops as we continue to develop throughout the season, as we continue to go through the season. Just looking at the rotation and what it's going to look like kind of going forward. The other final thing that I thought was interesting in this game, and the commentators kind of mentioned it, and it's something I hadn't noticed till they kind of pointed it out, and then I started looking for it a little bit more. Getting Uzan off the ball. Milos Uzan off the ball. Uzan off the ball is really an interesting kind of thing, and not something that I expected kind of heading into the season. So yeah, I think that is something also to watch as we kind of go forward there as well.
Yeah, I was sort of curious about that with Uzan and Flemings, both in the starting lineup. You got 2 guys who ostensibly are playing some kind of point guard role there, and curious. Like, obviously, Samson's pretty committed to these 5 guys, including Uzan and Flemings being in the same backcourt. Curious how that role, the point guard role, kind of shared between the 2 of those guys evolves. I'm going to take my cue from Kelvin Sampson when it comes to Chris Sinak Jr.'s performance multiple times in his in-game and post-game comments, because Sampson called it out. He seemed to be happy with Sinak's shot selection, even if they weren't falling on Saturday. Something else I noticed, he was able to give you 29 minutes without it really being affected by foul trouble, which is always something positive, always something to watch with a first-year big man, and how they're adjusting to being officiated in the Division I level. Of all the guys out of your veteran group, who all, to some degree, haven't had vintage starts this season, I would say JoJo Tugler is the guy I am least concerned about from that group, because his specific role in the team is changing the most. And I do agree that the 8 turnovers he has through 2 games don't look good on paper. Didn't feel great watching it. And he even said as much, I think, in front of the media today. But maybe I'm jinxing it by saying it just feels to me like an early season, small sample size, weird stat that I don't think will be indicative of how his entire season will go. Again, not saying there weren't times where I felt the offense maybe devolved a little bit to throw it to JoJo in the low block and watch him do a slightly worse version of what Jaywan used to do a lot the last couple seasons, which didn't love, but maybe what's keeping me optimistic here is that through these same two games, Tugler also has 5 blocks and 5 steals total. And unlike the opener against Lehigh, you didn't see him get into foul trouble. He's able to give you almost 30 minutes on the court. And if that ends up being indicative of what we see more games than not from Tugler this season, he's going to have a hell of a junior year. Also, I think undergirding all this just doesn't look like a guy who's 100% in game shape yet. And I know Samson's talked about that in the past. And I wouldn't say any of the 3 guys I referenced earlier concerns me when we're still talking about a 2-game season. But of the 3 returning guys, maybe would say Miles Uzan's first 2 games is what I'm noticing the most. And it's actually not so much for his shooting, because I mean, the early numbers there are bad, but he's not going to shoot 23% for the year on 3-pointers or 36% on 2-pointers. That to me is just like Tugler's early turnover numbers, just an in-season statistical anomaly when you only have 2 games played. What I'm taking more notice of, though, is when he's running the offense in the half court, at least in the Towson game, it to me looked a lot like Uzan getting the ball and the offense stalling out, not really getting close to the paint, kind of drifting in that area just outside of to just inside of the 3-point arc. I mean, you can't say this offense didn't get the ball to the bigs. Snack and Tugler combined for 22 shots. Like, whether they were as close to the basket as you or I would have liked, yeah, probably not as much, but they were getting the ball and getting involved. You could say that. Were the shots always falling? No, not really, but they were involved. It just didn't seem like you got that much in the way of penetration from either good looks getting close to the basket or kickouts for good looks from deep, though you did see, I think, the Cougs miss a few pretty good looks from the 3-point range in this one. I mean, I think it's way too early to say whether it's a worry or concern or anything in the ballpark of that. And I think running counter to my narrative here is the fact that he has an 11-3 assist to turnover ratio through these first 2 games. Granted, first 2 games against 2 teams that aren't expected to be among your better opponents in the entirety of the season. Certainly Uzan and the 2 returning stars I referenced, Sharp and Tugler, have earned lots and lots of patience from the Cougar fan base at large. Just stuff you notice early in the season. Cannot say enough good things, by the way, about Kingston Flemings. Probably should have mentioned him, one of us, earlier. There have been a lot of good guards who've come to this program under Kelvin Sampson, Bobby, and a healthy subset of those are guys that came in as high school recruits. But the number of guards who have come in and looked this good this early in their career, it's a very, very small number. It might be 0, though you can make a case for Caleb Mills leading the team in scoring in the 1920 season, though he did have a semester where he set out and at least got kind of acclimated to the program, whereas I believe Flemings just came in. I could be wrong on this, but I believe he played a full high school season last year and he didn't come in until the summer term. Regardless, even acknowledging what Towson is, a team that's going to be worse than most of the teams you see this season, certainly worse than probably every Big 12 opponent, it still is very eye-opening how physically ready he looks to slash against, say what you want, Lehigh and Towson, much older, much stronger opponents than he saw the vast majority of the time he was playing in high school and AAU ball. Even though his offensive performance is going to draw the headlines, and rightfully so, he led all players in scoring this one and looked very good doing it. What's really standing out to me, Bobby, is how capable Flemings looks at doing the non-scoring stuff that Kelvin Sampson's always going to demand from his guards. Just, I mean, the stuff that he demands of freshmen just to get on the court, period, much less be a starter who played the vast majority of this game's minutes and was the only Coug besides Tugler to have multiple steals. I think really eye-opening performance.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right for saying neither one of us called it out. And it's been an amazing performances by him so far.
My last thought, continue to be really intrigued by Chase McCarty. He does good things using the floor that aren't always reflected in the box score. Shades of Nate Hinton, which isn't a comparison I make lightly because he was one of my favorite Cougs of that period of Cougar basketball.
Yep.
And so before we get to the highest profile game of the young season, a little road trip east to Auburn or to Birmingham to face Auburn, We do have one more home game be occurring tomorrow night against a very battle-tested Oakland Golden Grizzly squad. That's a familiar name. Oakland was one of the Cinderella teams of the 24 NCAA tournament. They bounced Kentucky in the round of 64 in what would ultimately be John Calipari's final game in charge of the Wildcats. Shout out March hero Jack Bulkey from that Oakland team who just went nuclear in that Kentucky win. Perennially solid mid-major program. They're coached by Greg Campy, who has been at Oakland, Bobby, since 1984, before the Grizz were even a Division I program. One of my favorite weird, not super well-known annual college basketball things is that around Christmas time, I don't know if you know this, Bobby, Campy he'll just wear ridiculous Christmas sweaters on the sidelines. Mm-hmm. He actually got Tom Izzo last year. You probably saw the pictures of this one. He got Tom Izzo to wear a matching Grinch-themed sweater with him when Michigan State and Oakland played.
I do remember this.
Just awesome. Awesome. And Izzo seemed to be like a guy who seems like perpetually extremely serious. Izzo seemed to be an enthusiastic participant in that. So that was cool. Actual basketball talk. Oakland has played maybe the hardest 2-game opening stretch in the entire country. Opening on the road at Michigan and Purdue last week. And now the unenviable task of facing the current AP number 1, your Houston Cougars. Their opener against Michigan got away early and was never really that close, but they were tied at the half against Purdue and ended up losing by, I think, a pretty respectable 87-77 final margin to the preseason number 1 Boilermakers. They were second in the preseason Horizon League poll, only behind Milwaukee. Probably the number 1 opposing player to watch is their senior Aussie big man, Taburu Naiva Lurua. Shout out to me putting that little phonetic guide in there because I would not have gotten that first try. It was preseason first team all conference. Definitely requiring the Cougar big man to respect his perimeter range. He isn't having the most efficient start to the season, but I mean, it's probably more about playing Michigan and Purdue to start the year than anything he's doing. Really good at drawing fouls last season. Not good at getting to the line. I love that combo, Bobby, when it's like this guy's like top 100 in free throw rate and is hitting like 60-something% of them. It's just like, man, you're so close to cooking something here, man. But
yeah,
good player. We'll mention also Zaire Wells, stretch big man who scored 21 points against Purdue as an all-conference guy at the D2 level at Lenore Rhine, and Isaac Garrett, who's another new Division I player, comes from the JUCO ranks, had 20 in their opener against Michigan, is listed 6'9", haven't been a good early offensive rebounding team, but I mean, maybe that's more about who they faced, and did allow Purdue and Michigan to hit almost half their three-point attempts. So I've said a lot, Bobby. What would you like to add about the Grizz?
Yeah, man, you took most of what I was going to say here. I think it's absolutely insane. You kind of said they have maybe the hardest start to a season. I don't know if I've ever seen a start to the season as tough as this. Number 7, then you play number 1, then the next week you play the new number 1. And I would say there's a good chance that the reason why number 1's not number 1 anymore is because of how they played against you, right? Like you look at Purdue, they win by 10. That may be why somebody had them down. I actually went and looked. I don't know if we were kind of talking about this with a friend of the show, Bill, about, and I think co-host Emeritus Delson was on that text thread as well about how it was really close and they got almost double the amount of number 1 votes that we did. I kind of went and looked, and you can break it down by voter on the AP website. Somebody had Purdue at like number 9 and had us at number 2. That's pretty much the difference there in number 1 versus number 2 there. So,
which seems harsh, man. Like, I'm not trying to advocate for Purdue here, but like...
yeah, it was. I just kind of went through and looked at that. I was like, okay, cool, whatever, man. So that's really why we're number 1. But I would argue that again, that's why you see them is because of how Oakland played. Looking at the rotation, it seems like their 5 starters take up a majority of their minutes, so don't expect them to go too deep. I think in the two games that they've played, you kind of saw them go like 7 or 8 deep, maybe, like not too bad. I think versus Michigan when they were just getting absolutely blown out, I think they went pretty deep there. But against Purdue, a game that was tied at half, you saw them only go about 7 or 8 players deep, and those 7 or 8, I would say 2 of them, I think one had like 3 minutes and one had 9 minutes. So it wasn't like they even went super deep there. You pointed out my guy to watch. Zaire Wells, kind of a fun story. Played D2 last year, JUCO before that. Dropped 21 versus Purdue with 12 rebounds. Kind of feels like the kind of guy that when you make the tournament, nobody wants to play because they have that senior leadership. He really feels like a guy who could be a star in like a 13 versus 4 matchup where the 13 pulls off the upset. It feels like one of those where Zaire Wells would have like 13-9 and the game winner late in the second half to really seal the game. He has that kind of vibes for me as I went through his stats and saw how he played against some of these teams.
Yeah, no doubt. Glad you mentioned the ranking angle on that as well, and like crazy that they would get the number one then the number two back to back. Like I know some SWAC teams historically have played, and I'm sure many of them are this year, body bag kind of schedules, but like Michigan's number 6. And it's not like it was a secret when you scheduled it that, oh yeah, Michigan, Purdue, and Houston were supposed to come in here with good teams. So Greg Campy has faith in his guys, giving his guys a big test early. Would like to see a more convincing Cougar win than the first two, like I'm sure all of y'all listening would, but we shall see.
And, just to kind of go real quick on this last thing, how excited will Oakland be to play Defiance on on Saturday?
I am usually not like vigorously anti, like I have a strong opinion on it, but like I see the non-D1 team on the schedule, I'm like, really? Oakland, you have deserved this. I hope you beat them by like 100 or something like that. Not, no offense to Defiance College, but I would say this team has earned a game that doesn't involve facing one of the best handful of Division I opponents.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of something funny I noticed was like the next game is versus Defiance of NAIA. So
fantastic. And we'll certainly see the stiffest test of the young season to date on Sunday as the Cougs will travel to Birmingham and face a fellow 2025 Final Four team in the Auburn Tigers. Will be a very different looking Auburn team than the one in the Final Four and then the one we saw in person 12 months ago, even at the Toyota Center. Todd Pettiford, guy who torched the Cougs as a kind of coming out party early in his freshman season last year, is back and is basically the only guy who played minutes for Auburn. Yeah, the only guy who played minutes for Auburn at the Toyota Center who will take the court on Saturday. Janai Broom, they're all everything big men, has graduated along with several of their other key contributors. One of the few projected returning guys, Chad Baker Mazzara, is playing at USC now. Just from what little I've seen, sounds like that was kind of a messy divorce. And Bruce Pearl, their longtime head coach, did the classic retire when it's too late for the school to do a full search move, and his son Steven is now the head coach. Though, I will say, Auburn immediately gave Steven Pearl a several-year deal. I can't remember if it was 4 or 5, so maybe they would have just given him the job regardless when his dad retired. Bobby, I'm going to avoid doing what I did in the Oakland section and stop here. Tell me what you have learned about the Auburn Tigers.
Oh, no, man, it's all good. It's still early, but this, like you said, it's first real test for the Cougs. I think the big thing is going to be how do the freshmen do against a fairly experienced players team in Auburn. The first guy kind of stuck out to me is a guy who we've seen before last year at UCF versus the Cougs in Keyshawn Hall. Also interesting, it's very rare that you see two Keyshawns on a roster, but they have two there. Keyshawn Hall last year, the Cougs actually held him to his lowest point total with 6 last year, so he did pretty well against pretty much every other team in the Big 12 except for the Cougs. Really seems like Auburn likes getting him the ball. The other thing I noticed is he gets to the line really well. Shot 18 free throws in the nail biter versus in the overtime game that they had versus Bethune Cookman. The other matchup to watch very well could be Sinak versus Auburn freshman big Philip Jovic. Ken Palm has the Cougs winning this one by 6. I don't know, that feels about right. Just kind of, if I were just kind of setting the line on this game, 6 feels about right. But, it's a top 25 road game. Look, I know it's technically not in Auburn. It's in Birmingham, but this is for all intents and purposes. This is like when you play at Toyota Center. This is practically a road game for the Cougs.
Probably a few hundred fewer Coug fans, we're being honest, because Auburn brought like a decent They didn't
Yeah.
it wasn't like it was a Cougar building, but like they
Right,
brought a decent
right.
few fans there. I'll give them credit. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a top 25 road game. A win's a win. You give me a 1-point win here, and I will be pretty happy about it.
Fully agree. This will be both teams' first time facing anything like a top 25 opponent. Auburn, like the Cougs, didn't really challenge themselves, though, unlike the Cougs, actually got a serious scare put into them, which you mentioned in their opener in overtime by 95-90 score over Bethune-Cookman. To Hyde Pettiford, the one returning guy, his early shooting numbers aren't great, but you would kind of expect that from the only returning player and someone who I would imagine is being targeted pretty heavily by the early season scouting reports. They're facing Wofford tonight, actually. I put a note to myself to check on this. What's going on right now?
The Terriers?
Yep. Auburn up pretty convincingly over Wofford, who maybe is slightly better than their first two teams, but really not much so. Probably splitting the difference between like Lehigh and Towson. The Cougs will see also plenty of Sebastian Williams-Adams. He's a blue chip freshman who played at St. John's in the Houston area. You mentioned Filip Jovic, elite Serbian international recruit. Also, Keyshawn Hall. I remember, I can't remember which game it was, but I remember watching just a random UCF game while I was doing something else. And Keyshawn Hall like went off for like 30 plus for them last year. But then I went and checked kind of like you did, and he had probably his worst Big 12 game of the season against us. Kevin Overton, another former Big 12 guy who played at Texas Tech, as well as also on this Auburn roster. He'll be a rotation guy. This will be a team that, like the Cougs, fouls a lot, so expecting plenty of trips to the charity stripe. For any of their early struggles, they've done about as well, Auburn has, as you would expect offensively, granted against outmatched opponents, but I mean, considering it's almost an entirely new roster besides one guy, like, you give them credit for the early season efficiency. But defensively, it's been kind of where the challenges have been. And I don't want to overstate these struggles because Cougs aren't off to a vintage start by the insanely high standards that this program has so far. And they are top 30 nationally in opponent 2-point and 3-point field goal percentage. Bottom line, like you said, I think any Cougar win where you fly back to Houston from Birmingham about as healthy as when you left is welcome. I think before I did this preview, I knew vaguely, obviously, Janai Broom wasn't back, and I remembered a couple other guys kind of being at the end of their eligibility from when we previewed them, but I didn't realize before I did this exactly how much Auburn had lost off of last year's team. But again, like you said, you're playing in a building that will be 90 plus, 95 plus % Auburn fans. This is going to be a very, very challenging opponent, so any win here will be very welcome.
Absolutely. You just want to win here. These are the I am excited to see how the freshmen do in this game and how they react to that atmosphere, to an experienced team like Auburn. Again, I know you made the point that they didn't return a lot, but they brought a lot into the transfer portal, and you're going to see a team with a lot of talent that the Cougs are playing this weekend, and it's going to be interesting to see how the freshmen really kind of come out and play.
No doubt. Without any more delay, talk about the Cougar football game from last week. It was a happy result, even if it didn't stop being a stressful one until the clock just about hit zeros. On Friday night, as the Cougars outlasted UCF 30-27, became the first non-UCF team to win their annual space game. Not a game where everything went right. For the second game in a row, unfortunately, the Cougs gave the ball away 4 times with 3 Connor Wigman picks in a second straight week where the Cougs lost the ball deep in their own territory via a punt return gaffe of some kind. For that fact alone, this team should feel fortunate they escaped Orlando with the win, but that also shouldn't overshadow the good stuff this Cougar team did either, because even acknowledging the turnovers, U of H's offense was by far the more effective of the two teams. On Friday, they outgained the Knights by about 150 yards, and coming off one of your worst rushing performances of the season against West Virginia, rushed for 200 plus against a pretty stout run defense, and might have had to throw the season from that Wigman to Amari Thomas second quarter long touchdown reception. Cougar defense also had a much better performance than anyone who was just glancing at the final score would think. Remember, UCF had a pick 6 touchdown and got a super short field 25-yard touchdown drive in the second quarter off that punt return fumble I mentioned a bit ago. We knew coming into the defense would have an easier task than the offense, but coming off of a really bad performance, maybe your worst of the season against West Virginia, can't be anything but happy that the Cougar defense gave you a really solid performance on Friday night. The two of us came to this game with very different attitudes. I didn't think the Cougars were incapable of beating UCF, but this has been really up until the game ended, one of those games where I didn't feel great about the Cougars winning it. Go back to the preseason, and even as UCF has struggled at times through the season, and my co-host here was more of the mind that it would be a close Cougar win and has been pretty consistent over my memory in that regard, which ended up very much being so. Score one for my co-host Space Game Skepticism as the Cougs for the 5th time this season found a way to win a tough one on the road. Bobby, give me your big picture thoughts after this one, and as always, whenever you're ready, kick us off with your overlooked play of the game from Friday night's win.
Yeah, just a real gutsy win for the Cougs. Never really felt comfortable up until that final interception. Another turnover fest from Wickman, but the defense stood up, and after a couple of stinkers the last month or so, had one of their better performances of the season. So hard to be anything but happy with how the game went. Overlooked play. It's in the last drive of the first half. Wigman throws throws that pick six. Cougs are down 24-14. You come out, you're driving the ball. You're down 10, and UCF is getting the ball at the half. That's something to kind of remember here. It really felt like a spot where if you go down 10, they get the ball, they come out, they score. Especially if they score a touchdown, it's a 17-point game. You kind of feel like the game's pretty damn close to over with the atmosphere there, the fans rocking. You're down 3 scores. You're not feeling great, right? But what happens is the Cougs end up driving a little bit. They face a 4th and 3 from the UCF 40. You're out of field goal range. I mean, maybe you can send him out there. Maybe you can send Ethan Sanchez out there, but I don't know. That's a 56-yarder. You're kind of hoping and praying, and if you don't make it, there was like 20 seconds left. UCF can go down, maybe get another field goal or something there. So, but it's 4th and 3 at the UCF 40. Cougs, Wigman actually completes a pass for 18 yards there. Kind of a little bit of a gutsy throw there, going 18. Really makes that field goal much more manageable. Makes it about a 40-yarder there, and then you go into the half down only 7. And I don't know why. I know it's only 3 points, but it really felt like a different game heading into halftime than it would have had you given up and not converted that 4th down there. So, Sam, what was yours, buddy?
I picked a play from the exact same possession. Great minds think alike. Sometimes no coordination here. I promise that final possession of the first half where the Cougars would ultimately, like Bobby said, get the field goal to cut the lead back to 1 touchdown. We'll just reiterate what you said. I know that drive only represented 3 points, but I believe that field goal drive and the Trey McCutcheon pick 6, those were the second quarter moments that kept what ended up being a very tight margins game from getting away from this Cougar team. The play I picked from this drive is a 7-yard run by Dean Connors on 2nd and short. That run got the Cougs into UCF territory. I picked it again because this drive is the point in time during this game where I believe the script flipped, or U of H at least kept UCF from really, having a 10-point margin and getting the ball at halftime. Not saying that's insurmountable, but I think that becomes psychologically a tougher hill to climb. Not that this team can't climb it. And I believe on this drive as well, the rushing success that the Cougars would enjoy most of the second half, I think that this is where you really started. Because we were noticing the first quarter and a half, the Cougars really didn't have much joy running the football. And this felt like the drive where I don't know whether it was getting your head right or just figuring something out UCF was doing. But for whatever reason, from here on, the Cougars really ate in the run game. And that is also part of why I picked this play. I really do believe, whether my opinion is rational, I guess it's your opinion too, because I think we share it here, that this game would have gone differently had you not, coming off Wigman's second interception, the most costly one because it was the one that UCF ran back for a touchdown, that getting into that locker room off of some momentum, the big pass play to Kobe Young that you singled out, some success in the running game. I thought, that was an important overlooked play on an important overlooked drive. So that's why I picked it. And I think you and I were of very similar minds this week.
Yeah, I think that drive is one that gets overlooked. I think a lot of people won't consider a field goal drive late in the first half, but it really felt like an inflection point for the game. If you don't score there, mm, it looks like a much tougher road to come back.
We'll leave with the Cougar defense talk tonight because honestly, I think we felt a little bit bad. It's been so long since we've led with a defense performance after they did well specifically. Previous leads have just been, I see, they didn't play so great. And this Cougar defensive performance was exactly what you wanted to see after, I think, a pretty uncharacteristically bad day out against West Virginia. And you could never boil any performance down to just two stats, but I believe the two I'm about to give you, Bobby, really reflect what a good game this was for the Cougar defense. The most obvious one, just for the entire game, UCF went for 4.7 yards per play. Anything under 5 is a good day, devoid of any context, which I think reflects what the Cougars did here. And I think the most striking one to me is that UCF's offense only had one scoring drive the entire game that was longer than 36 yards. It was the 10-play, 75-yard touchdown drive where UCF retook the lead after the Cougs went up 14-10 around middle of second quarter or so.
I didn't even think about that, but that's a really good point. Sorry to kind of interrupt you there, but that is a great stat that they didn't have a drive longer than that besides one. Yeah.
And it was one of those things that, like, having watched it, like, yeah, that checks out. It didn't feel like there was a lot of drive where I was just sitting here watching them march down the field on us. But it's still like I double and triple checked it because it did kind of surprise me. I was like, wow, they didn't have a single one longer than 36 yards other than that second quarter one. And those two stats should tell anyone who harbors any questions about the Cougar defensive performance here that this team did a very good job. And I don't think anyone who actually watched this game would question this, that those 27 points that UCF has, technically they're on the defense's ledger, but those don't in any way tell an accurate story about how that group played on Friday night. Sorry for all the stats. I do have two more that I think really cements the case that this was a high-level performance. UCF's 136 passing yards on Friday was its lowest output, home or away, of the entire 2025 season. Their 282 total yards of offense was their lowest home output of the current season, the second lowest of the entire season, home or away. Same for the 4.7 yards per play. That was their second worst of the season, I think, ahead of only Baylor from the previous week. And this defense forced multiple turnovers for the first time since the Colorado game and got its first defensive touchdown. When did you think this team had its last defensive touchdown, Bobby? I had to look this up. I was not able to get this off the top of my head, so don't feel bad if ultimately don't get it.
I gotta be honest, I don't feel like we had one last year even. Maybe we did.
We did dude, Jeremiah Wilson against Baylor.
Duh. Yeah.
And AJ Halsey had some too,
Yeah.
but less. Yeah. But no, last one this year. What was the last game where we had a defensive touchdown this year? And this is not a trick question. There was a previous game.
Was it SFA? Was it SFA?
Close. Rice. Will James had that pick six late against Rice.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, don't feel bad. I had to double, and when I found it out, I was like, oh yeah, and I remembered the game situation, but I didn't get it without prompting.
Yep, I remember that now.
And you got that with Trey McCutcheon running back his second pick of the season in the second quarter at a moment where the Cougar team really needed a jolt. And this was something we talked about after the West Virginia game, that the Cougar defense, for all of the good things they've done this season, hadn't really been doing that much to change the game. And this week, in a game where you really needed it, they came through. Couldn't have been more clutch. Bobby, I think I've talked enough. Those are my overall thoughts. What did you see from the Cougar defense on Friday night?
Yeah, man, heading into this game, we knew that this wasn't a very good Central Florida offense. But, we also knew that West Virginia wasn't a very good offense, and we saw how that went. The past few games, tackling was a bit of a problem. You didn't really see that much in this game. I thought tackling had improved quite a bit. I've mentioned this before, but at media days, everyone mentioned kind of to just watch out for the younger McCutcheon, Trey. They said he was just flying around during practice, and guess what? We saw it on Friday, right? He had that pick six, 4 tackles. There was a little bit of questioning I think you and I had in a couple of games in terms of what Austin Armstrong was kind of seeing, and things weren't lined up properly. But, buddy, I thought you came out and you answered every question this defense needed to answer. They answered very strongly, I would say, in this in this game. I think this was the performance that made you go back and go, oh yeah, this is a good defense, right? Versus West Virginia, you started, that West Virginia game, and what was the game before West Virginia?
Arizona State.
One before that. Sorry, I don't have
Arizona.
the Arizona. Thank you. The Arizona game also made you just kind of go, is this defense actually what we think they are? And you saw them kind of fall down the SP Plus rankings a little bit. They fell about 15, 16 spots. And this game came back and they answered pretty strong in the affirmative about what we think they are.
You did see when UCF put in their backup quarterback, Davy Balfour, late in the game. He did have some success calling his own number in the run game, but I feel like the important context there is that this is the Cougar defense on the final possession defending a touchdown lead, and how you approach defending a 2-minute drill when you're ahead by a touchdown is a bit different than if you're only up by a field goal or if this had been a tie game or something like that. So in essence, the Cougar defense at that time was kind of inviting Balfour to run a little bit, because the goal in that situation is to avoid a touchdown at all costs, even if it means allowing him to run for a first down while the clock is moving. And the one time he passed, it ended up getting picked in the end zone by Kentrell Webb. So just something to watch, as his defense has had its problems defending the quarterback run. Though, now that I think about it, Josh Hoover, TCU's not really a runner, and I don't think Sawyer Robertson at Baylor is too. So just scratch my mobile quarterback point there, Bobby. But the Knights offense had their moments running the ball, but never really were able to establish it to a level that allowed them to take over the game. They just had a nice play here, a nice play there. Like, their numbers aren't terrible, but they weren't able to really pound the rock on the Cougs like West Virginia was able to do the previous week at times, which is a good sign and something I hoped would be the case when we talked about a pretty uncharacteristic performance by the run defense against West Virginia. Because UCF struggling to pass the ball wasn't really that much of a surprise, I think, to either of us. That's been the case most of the season for them, and you could tell watching this that their quarterback, Taven Jackson, not close to 100%. But I'm still not going to ding the Cougar defense for taking care of business and getting two really critical game-shifting turnovers. I think this vaults this, even considering the opponent's strength, to one of the Cougar defense's better performances this season on the road when you really needed it, when your offense ended up being a little bit turnover happy. And your last two opponents this year, I mean, for the regular season, are going to ask a lot tougher questions in the pass game than UCF did, or for that matter, West Virginia did. But I like that going into those two final games with a bye week in between on a high confidence wise, that the Cougar defense is going to be, that's how we're going to be going into these final two regular season games, as opposed to off of going into this 2 of 3 performances, specifically Arizona and West Virginia, being arguably your 2 worst ones of the season. It was good to get some positive momentum there against the Knights. We'll go to the offense here, because this was, we'll say, not a weird performance. Maybe, yeah, we'll say weird performance by the Cougar offense. And it wasn't all bad weird, I guess was my convoluted point there. You do have, I think, a big bad headline from this game. The second week in a row, your offense turned the ball over 3 times as part of the team's second straight week of 4 turnovers. This week, those 3 turnovers from the Cougar offense all came in the form of Connor Wigman interceptions. And to my eye, none of those 3 had any evidence of being the not on the quarterback type of interceptions that you sometimes see. I think for the most part in the 3 of those, Wigman got good pockets to throw out of, and to varying degrees, all 3 were passes that Connor just missed on. Shout out to Denman, the UCF DB, for a career night. I think you got to give him credit on those as well, though I would say none of the 3 were good throws. Certainly the pick 6 I would put in the handful of worst throws that Wigman has done this season. I'm not going to certainly put in the level of the pick 6 against West Virginia, but I mean, unless it's just a heinously run route, which I don't think is the case here, you putting the ball in that spot where your opponent can return it like that, it doesn't really reflect well on the quarterback. But on the flip side of that negativity, this was the second time this season that the Cougar offense managed to gain at least 200 yards in both the passing and running games, a 4th time total in the 2025 Cougar season that the offense has managed 200 plus rushing yards And that's the most since the 2019 season. I had a number in the 2019 season that was skewed by the early 4-game stretch of De'Aaron King playing before he quit on that team. And you got at least 3 more games to play on this current season, so potential to add to that number of 4 200-plus yard rushing games. So it's not all bad. Like, the 3 interceptions will rightfully grab headlines. And again, all 3 were not good throws, but outside of those 3 picks, the offense mostly moved the ball in UCF. Not that every single possession went exactly how you wanted to, and that was a vintage performance. I mean, it was not, like, in the strictest sense, you put 23 points on the board, your Cougar offense did, because you did get the 7 from the Treacher McCutcheon pick 6. This is one of those games that if you fed all of the game numbers and play-by-play and whatever into any predictive model, it probably would have expected this to be a more decisive Cougar win than we actually got, but for the 3 picks. But even with those 3 picks being part of the data set, you still, like, post-game winning expectancy in this was between 81 and 82%. Again, those turnovers, though, indisputably allowed UCF to hang around in this game, and in one case allowed them to put 7 points in the scoreboard. So not all bad news, not all good news. Bobby, what are your big Cougar offensive takeaways from this one?
Yeah, man, I want to say this before I say my first initial thought, and that is that Sam and I have zero insider information when it comes to this, but I do question if Connor Wigman's a little hurt when we talk about these turnovers. And the reason why I say that is not because they were bad decisions, in my opinion. I think he made the right reads, but the picks were all throws that were pretty much behind the receiver. And that's not something we've seen a lot from Connor Wigman this year. A lot of his bad throws have been ones that sail, where he kind of throws it off the back foot a little bit. He lets it go a little early and it kind of sails over. It just seems that the ball's just not getting there quite as fast as it was before. And he kind of thinks, I can fit it in this window here. And then suddenly he can't. And those are windows that he was hitting earlier in the season. So again, we don't have any insider information. I can't tell you if I'm right, wrong. It just kind of had that vibe to me. And this is back-to-back games where we've just seen uncharacteristic throws like that from Wakeman. You know, it like I said, it's almost like the ball just wasn't getting there fast enough, and that's not to take away from the DBs either. The defensive back made some really good plays out there. Whenever you have 3 interceptions in a game, you're making some good reads, you're making some good plays, but it just kind of felt a little weird to me watching it. I noticed also looking at the box score, you'd think it was a pretty good game on the ground, but just live, it didn't feel like it. It felt like Dean Connors was being met in the backfield quite a bit. But it just didn't feel like you were averaging what you actually ended up averaging there. You did see a spark from DJ Butler. He seemed to be a better answer to the run game versus Dean Connors in this game. Dean really, as you watch him, seems to be more of a kind of runner who is a little patient, watches the play develop. The hole will get there. He can kind of hit it and pick you up 6 or 7, or go for the explosive play and kind of go off there. DJ just really feels like he felt like this game, the holes were there for a second and then shutting pretty quick, which didn't work for Dean. DJ Butler just was able to hit the hole, dive through, pick up 7, and just, go about he just hit the hole faster, if that makes sense. But yeah, I thought it was, offensively, it was a perfectly fine game. It's the kind of offensive performance that we just kind of expect from this team. Do I love Connor having 22 carries? No. But it's clear that him being able to run the ball is the thing that is going to set up the rest of this offense. And so if he's got to run it 22 times, then he's got to run it 22 times. It's not my favorite thing, though.
Well, shout out. I think this was one of the better Cougar offensive line performances of the season. 2 sacks allowed, but I firmly believe at least one of those was a coverage sack as opposed to any kind of serious failure by your line to keep a clean pocket and give Wigman time. And again, I would say the most convincing, obvious evidence of his performance is that the Cougars are now the only team in the 2025 season to have broken 200 rushing yards against UCF in Orlando. And Jalen Daniels, and Kansas are on their schedule. Like, that's a good rushing offense. That's one of the best rushing quarterbacks in college football. And that was really what gave me the most heartburn when we previewed UCF last week, that coming off of a really bad rushing performance against a not very good West Virginia defense, that now we had to see this offense face a better UCF defense and a much better UCF run defense. This game was a reminder that the 2025 version of this offensive line is not perfect, is probably not still to the level of unit that you can really rely on week in, week out yet, but it is still miles better than it was at any point last season. And even going back to two seasons ago when you had a future pro at left tackle, I would argue, I would go, as much as I love Patrick Paul and would love a combination of the four best linemen on this line and Patrick Paul, I would say this was better than Holgo's last offensive line as well, despite having, I think, one more future pro probably in that group. This doesn't cancel out the games where the O-lines played poorly, but I think now that we have 10 games, we can definitively say that Willie Fritz and the staff fixed the Cougar offensive line as well as you can reasonably expect. Maybe in a reality where this is a much more resource program, you'd still get the O-line's poor games and say, yeah, but you could be better here. And you could still look at that and say, honestly, yeah, you could be better. But in this reality, I would say this is about as good of a 1 year flip on the toughest position group to quickly flip as any Coug fan should reasonably expect. If you think it should be better, please go find us a Cody Campbell who's willing to throw 8 figures of money on portal and high school recruiting. I think this line is functional enough that, I mean, the offense, Bobby, has almost doubled its scoring average from 2024, and you're sitting on 8 wins with at least 3 games left to play this season, something probably far better than you or I or most Cougar fans, there being us, thought this team would be here in just about mid-November. Kudos to DJ Butler as well. I'm glad you gave him the shout out. Has gotten an opportunity now this season with injuries at different points. Stacey Sneed and Jamarian Burnett during the season, Rashawn Sanford before it. And I think given maybe a bigger opportunity than we expected, has really shown stuff in flashes, was asked to carry a much higher percentage of the load than he ever has as a college player on Friday night and looks pretty good. Also, can't say enough, Amari Thomas, his second 100-plus yard receiving game against a Big 12 opponent, 3rd overall of the season. We've said a lot about Connor Wigman, about what he didn't do well in this one. That pass from Wigman to Thomas, one of Connor's best throws of the season, but make no mistake, just as good of a route by Amari Thomas to get open on it as well.
Yep. Oh, you kind of pointed this out in the instant react. Most of Amari Thomas's damage, maybe all of it, was in the first half. And without that, I think the Cougs aren't in this game without Amari Thomas in that first half there.
Tanner Koziel also did his usual stuff in the short to medium yardage to keep the offense going. He's become U of H's best weapon for keeping or getting the offense back on schedule. And we now have 2 good examples of that from that final first half drive. The Cougs cut the UCF lead back to 1 touchdown that Bobby and I have talked so much about. They caught a 7-yard ball on first down to set up 2nd and short. And then on 3rd and very long, with the offense having the ball just on their own side of midfield, very little time left in the half, catches an 11-yard pass to set up 4th and short, which Bobby's overlooked play ended up being a long completion to Kobe Young. Not that anyone's really questioned this, but you almost can't quantify how valuable an ad this offense Koziel has been and how much having him has allowed you to do in other areas. I think my last offensive thought is that you're never going to feel good about a 3 interception effort. I'm not going to sugarcoat that here, but it says something that despite having 3 different empty possessions from your offense where UCF took the ball away, that they still did enough to be able to win this game. There are still some of the same issues. Can't forget the 2 red zone trips on your final 2 real possessions that ended both inside of UCF's 20, with U of H having to settle for a field goal in both instances. This is not me saying this is an elite offense that still doesn't have things that it struggles with, areas where it can improve, but each week is still, for the most part, a reminder of how much higher the ceiling is for this offense as compared to where it was a season ago, maybe even 2 seasons ago as well. I don't want to end this with a negative thought, Bobby, but my main special teams thought, besides just week in, week out being grateful that we have a kicker in Ethan Sanchez who's almost automatic inside of 50, 2 straight weeks of fumbles on punt returns isn't acceptable.
No, it's not. You cannot, you simply cannot do it, especially in a game like this. And you saw in a game last week as well, where it cost you valuable points. And the game last week, maybe it didn't cost you points, but it cost you a chance to go down and tie that game up, win that game outright. It's just you give up 7 this week on it, and then the following or the week before you gave up a chance at 7 and a chance at winning a football game. It very well could have cost you 2 football games to have that happen to you.
And I know each thing was different. Last week it was, or I guess 2 weeks ago now, it was a ball hitting a Cougar player who wasn't the returner versus, and this one, the returner muffing the punt. But it's bottom line, 2 weeks in a row of Cougar special teams giving the ball away deep in your own territory. It's just something that can't happen, especially now with the primary returner who is playing his 5th college season and by the numbers, I'm sorry, has been demonstrably worse than Cougar opponents at returning punts. I don't want to overstate my complaint here because the other 10 guys in the field have as much, if not more, to do with the viability of when you return a punt than Mekhi Muse. I'll just say I would have a higher tolerance for this kind of mistake if U of H had ever looked dangerous in the return game with Muse, and for whatever reason, don't want to put it all on him, but just hasn't happened. I mean, I'm going to end on a positive note. I would have been happy with any margin of win against UCF playing in their space game. This was exactly that. If you wanted to see the Cougars bounce back from a really poor performance against West Virginia, you saw that, and on a short weekend on the road. And this team is now 5-0 away from Houston this season. I don't want to overstate that because 3 of those are Rice, a road game in only the most technical sense, and pretty terrible Oregon State and Oklahoma State teams. But in the last 2 road games, you have beat a top 25 Arizona State team that this is still their only home loss in the last 2 seasons, coming off them beating Tech and beating UCF in a game that they never lost before Friday, in a season where they had been, despite their challenges, a much better home team. That's worth being excited about and proud of. You consider yourself a Cougar fan.
Absolutely.
You want a chance to talk shit about Space Game, UCF?
No, Sam, I do. No, Sam, I do not. I am going to take the higher road, except our fans suck, and seeing them whine that are who was it that did it? Who told them fuck you? Or said fuck UCF?
Kentrell Webb.
Yes, it was Kentrell Webb. I couldn't remember exactly who it was, but watching their fans just complain about it, and then watching their fans on Twitter like, we lost to this crap team. Sir, we have 8 wins. Like, get on our level, all right? Like,
I kind of love seeing, like, I would love to obviously be have a football team that is somewhere in the ballpark, like what the basketball team is. But I kind of love just seeing teams be like, oh my God, like Colorado was doing it. Remember Colorado was doing it after week 3? Like, this team just isn't very good. And it's like, buddy, that's a mirror you're looking at.
And then I also love when it's like, to your point, being at this level, I love kind of flying under the radar like the Cougs are this year. And teams are like, they got their ass kicked by West Virginia, and then they beat us, and it's like, yeah, we had a bad game versus West Virginia. Like, we're pretty good this year, guys. Or you have the conversations, you watch the conversations, and it's like, wait, is Houston going to win 9 games this year? And you're like, there's a good chance. There's a good chance. Last year, one of the podcasts you and I listen to, Split Zone Duo, we talk about it every week when they do it. Last year it was you have your Houston voucher game. And like this year, there's no Houston voucher, and now it's starting to pop up like on their hurry ups or their previews. They're like, wait a minute, Houston's at 8 right now. Are they going to get 9, maybe 10 if they win their bowl game? And it's like, okay. The problem with that though is national news people are going, wouldn't it be smart to hire Willie Fritz? And I'm like, shut up. No, it wouldn't. That's a terrible move. Shut your mouth. All right, shut up.
Exactly. Obviously, no game to preview in the week to come, but like we did after our first bye, we're gonna each give you some of our thoughts. And in this case, each of our spiciest U of H football takes, and share a few of the ones that y'all shared with us after the UCF game. Bobby, 10 games now in the books in this regular season. Give me your spicy UH football take, or takes if you're feeling punchy. It's the word of the day for this podcast, punchy. I'm ready, buddy.
Screw it. The Cougs win the next 2, and they head to Arlington, where I will be searching for a ticket, and the Cougs will be in Arlington, despite what I have said, the whole season, it comes down the Cougs beat TCU and Baylor, and they end up in Arlington. BYU and Cincy actually play each other. So one of them's going to have 2 losses in conference. Okay? Then what you need
If
is
anyone's seen the Brian, if anyone's seen the Brian Windhorse, like where he holds up the 2 fingers, and he's like, "Why would they do that?" Bobby's kind of doing that right now. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You're exactly right. Right? So they play each other. So one of them's going to have 2. One of them will have 2 losses. Okay? Then what you got to hope is you got to have the winner of that game is going to have to drop a game, right? To get the 2 losses. And then tiebreakers come into play and all this different stuff. I don't know how that's going to fall out, what happens, right? But I if you can get everyone to 2 losses, you got a shot, bud, right? So, you have Cincy. If Cincy loses or if Cincy wins, can Cincy also lose at TCU is the question. And I think they can. If they beat BYU, I think they have to go to TCU. TCU is going to pack the house for that game. That'll be a top 25 Cincy team. Like, I don't know. I just kind of feel like that could happen. And then, BYU gets a little tougher to believe, right? If you buy into the BYU hype, if you think BYU is actually what their ranking says. But again, a TCU upset, not out of the realm of possibility there, right? So if you beat TCU and those 2 lose to TCU, Sam, that's a dub for you in common opponent, and that's part of one of the tiebreakers. That's like the next step after head to head. I'm not saying that you should book a ticket to Arlington, but Sam, I got a nice couch. It's a good sleeping couch that will be ready for you when you do decide to make the trek to DFW.
Oh yeah, if that happens, I am moving whatever needs to be moved. Same deal as when we were in the Sweet 16 6 years ago, and Dustin and I drove up for that, we flew up for that immediately after driving up to Tulsa for the first 2 rounds. Like that's gonna happen. I will be there on that sleeping couch if the Cougs manage to do that. And as I expected, I am coming into this with the second spiciest of the 2 takes between us, which is fine. Knew the risk. My spicy take that is not nearly as spicy as my co-host here is that I believe the Cougars will get to 10 wins with a bowl game. I'm not saying the bowl game is going to be the 10th win. And this is not me necessarily predicting the Cougars will be 2-0 against that final stretch of Baylor and TCU. In fact, gun to my head, I think my general expectation there is 1-1, though.
Me too.
I haven't decided exactly which one is one. I guess this is why I'm not nearly as spicy here as yours. But for some reason, just as because I thought about 10 wins at first, I was like, just think harder here. And I just kept going back to like 10 wins. Like I just was somehow convinced that 10 wins and people were going to make jokes. Oh, this team win 10 games. Like, don't care. 10 win Houston Cougars. I woke up Monday morning of this week just feeling super confident that a 10 win Houston Cougar football team is in our future. And thus that is my take here. I hope it is spicy enough. And let's just say I certainly would have thought this was spicy if you had told me after the Rice game 2 months ago that I would be coming on this show and predicting 10 wins with a straight face and having it be certainly the second spiciest of the 2 takes between us here. And yet here we are.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think about, bud. It's crazy to think that I could even mathematically get us to Arlington, right? Like, it's a spicy take. Like, if we had 4 losses and I'm like, we'll play in Arlington, I'm just dumb. Mathematically, what I said is possible. And that's crazy to think about. Again, to your point, if after the Rice game I would have said, hey, through 10 games, the Cougs mathematically are going to be able to get into Arlington, that would have been a crazy spicy take. That would have been the insane crazy take.
Brother, let's just get to 6-7 wins first.
Yeah. And now it's like, mathematically, that's possible.
I mean, I'll just say, mention this on social media, but not here. When you and I and co-host emeritus Dustin predicted preseason records, he's already clinched closest without going over. Like, because he was the only one of us that had 8-4. You and I both went 7-5 for ours. So shout out to Shout out to newly optimistic Cougar football fan Dustin on that one. We'll get some listener takes here. A few of y'all's. Though I will say, even though I like all the ones, I didn't use all the ones. And Bobby, anytime I open this up, I get at least one that makes me just quit being a U of H fan for a brief moment because I'm so overwhelmed by the stupidity of it. Bobby, there's a story in the Onion or one similar publication, and maybe I'm paraphrasing better the headline, but you've probably seen this. The headline was like, "We taught this chimpanzee in the median American voters' politics, and he hanged himself."
Yes.
And this is not, to be clear, it's not any actual like legit reference to suicide, but that's how I feel at least a little bit whenever I see at least one U of H fan's equivalent of a hot take. But I like the ones we got here, even if I don't agree with all of them. We can quickly react to them here. Bobby, Burner Coog 2 says, quote, "U of H does not have a student attendance problem. And from what I've seen from the crowd shots at the stadium this year, I tend to agree. This also makes me feel a bit nostalgic because remember when you and I, as much younger versions of the two of us, would say some variation of, circa 2008, 2009, man, we really show up. If only U of H alums would show up at the level of us students." And it just warms my heart that all these years later, the Zoomers are having similar conversations as you and I did many years ago.
Yeah, I gotta say, it's never been a student issue.
Don't disagree, by the way. Don't disagree.
No, we can talk about that all we want to, about how about how the attendance isn't great, like blah blah blah. Man, the students show up. Maybe that post Halloween game. I don't know if you remember your college life, Sam, but some of the biggest parties I had attended were Halloween, an 11 a.m. kickoff. As much as I hate that being an excuse, as much as I hate that being an excuse for why attendance is bad, is 11 a.m. 11 a.m. the day after Halloween. Yeah, I kind of get why the students were a little bit short there, but students have been bringing it for years and years and years. We talk about how U of H is, people love to hit us with it's a commuter school. That's why no one's engaged. We have like the second most beds on campus in the entire state of Texas than anyone else does. The students do show up to games.
No doubt. Our longtime friend P. Ray Ray says, if, and a big if, everything falls right and the Cougs make the Big 12 championship, so he's kind of on your train here, Bobby. The Cougs will win the game. Love you, P. Ray. If we're in that game and Texas Tech's the other team, we'll win that one. Sorry.
If we are in, but you know what? I said we'd go 7-5. So what the hell do I know?
Yeah. I hope I'm wrong.
To be honest, what the hell do I know? I said we go 7-5.
I think the one I agree with the most, at least the declarative ones, Yahoo Coug 90 says, quote, "Cougs will finish with the second best recruiting class in the Big 12 after flipping a couple Baylor Bears when they fired Dave Aranda after they lose the Cougs in the season finale." And this is not me saying not spicy in a derogatory way, more just like, yeah, I think that's actually a pretty likely outcome. I think probably third highest rate. I think he's going off of like average recruit rating, not the cumulative thing, which I think is honestly, it's the better one. I do get that recruiting is a volume game to some degree. You're not going to hit on a lot of guys. So if you bring in more, better chance to get more players, et cetera, et cetera. But I do try to look at average rating too, because you'll see some teams inadvertently game the system with 27, 28 guy classes that have maybe not an amazing average rating. So I can see it.
That's me when I am coaching UTSA as their offensive coordinator on NCAA Football 26. I'm like, give me 30 recruits and we have the number 28 class in the nation. And it's like, maybe not. But yeah.
Let's get that bonus, baby.
Yeah, I don't know if that's actually a spicy in the traditional take of controversial. I do think that you very well could see this class being, you're bringing in. Is Keyshawn the best recruit we've ever had? I'd argue Ed Oliver's probably.
I think it's Ed Oliver was very slightly higher rated, but yeah. they're both like top 20 in the country, level 5 stars. So we're talking very rarefied air.
But you kind of look back at why teams never, especially the Oklahoma teams, never wanted U of H to be in the Big 12.
Yeah,
you kind of see it, bud.
So Joe asked us a spicy question. In the interest of not putting on stuff I entirely agree with, or at least enjoy the take of, Joe asks, Is this year's team the weakest 8-2 P4 team ever? I will answer that succinctly. No, it fucking isn't. It's not even the weakest 8-2 P4 team this year, because I would argue Virginia is a worse team.
Virginia, yep. Yeah. I think, look, if you're looking at it and you go, oh man, we avoided a lot of the really good teams in the Big 12 this year. Sure, you can say that as much as you want to. Indiana last year was a team that was pretty good, but they got to play the weak side of the Big 10 last year. They had a weak Big 10 schedule. Now this year they're showing that they are actually a good team, right? And how good they actually were. But last year you kind of followed that Indiana team, kind of wondering when the hammer was going to fall on them, and it never really did. I'm not saying that this U of H team was better than, that Indiana team was last year, but really, to your point, Sam, the schedule is the schedule. You played it. You've looked good against the bad teams that you've played, and you can only play the teams that are in front of you. Look, I'm not saying that if this team's in the SEC that they are, top 3 in the SEC or top 4 in the SEC, but look, I think this team could go to the SEC and compete middle class. I think this U of H team's better than, like an Arkansas or something like that. I don't think it's the worst 8-2 team that's ever stepped foot on the football field. Do I think it's like a great 8-2 team? You had a couple of wins against a bad Oregon State team, a Rice team that has a new coach. You have the SFA win, maybe those 3, but you went to Tempe and you beat Arizona State in Arizona State, something nobody has done in 2 years, something the best team in the Big 12 and arguably one of the best teams in the country, that I think they were just number 6 in the playoff bracket, couldn't do. This is a solid football team. Is it an incredible football team? Is it a playoff contender? Is it a national champion contender? Is it even a top 25 team? Probably not. But at the end of the day, this is a top 40 team in the country. Would you disagree with that, Sam?
No, not at all. I think I generally
And if you're-
disagree.
and
I
if you're
generally
top-
agree with your points at all. Yeah.
And if you're top 40, you're not one of the worst P4 programs to sit at 8-2 ever.
You don't have to call this one of your all-time. This is not me directed to the questioner necessarily. You don't have to say like this is one of the all-time best U of H teams I watch, et cetera, because it's not. It's not for me. It's not for Bobby. It's probably not for you unless you became a fan 3 years ago. Which again, not a knock. Everyone jumps in at different times.
I'm sorry if you did.
Cougar fan. Yeah, if you've been ride or die these most of 3 seasons after the first 2, like you're a soldier. Good on you. Like you've
welcome to the club. We've all done it. We've all
welcome
done
to the
it.
club. But if you can't find enjoyment out of this season, I don't know, man. Like, just go be a fan of another team. I hesitate saying that. I hesitate saying that when we don't. There aren't as many of us Cougar fans as we like, but you're not missed here. Last one, because this is a question. I'm curious about your answer to this, so I think I know the answer. Cougmeister asks, do you all prefer the Pop-Tarts Bowl or Alamo/Texas Bowl? Which, again, I picked it because also just like it is so awesome to be November 11th answering this question as a certainty that we're going to be going to one of these bowl games.
Yeah, I mean, like the Pop-Tarts Bowl is fun and everything, and they have the mascot and the giant Pop-Tart trophy or the toaster trophy, and it's a great bit. I love the bit. I enjoy watching the game. They make it fun. That's what a bowl game should be. At the end of the day, though, I care more about football than I do a Pop-Tart mascot. I think it's cool. I think the good thing for U of H is being in that game. But Sam, who won the Pop-Tart Bowl last year? Who played it?
K-State and an ACC team.
Right, so we can talk about exposure all you want to because there's so many eyes on it. No one ever talks about that football game.
The exposure was on Pop-Tarts, the brand.
Yeah, and look, again, I love it. I think it's hilarious. It's great. That being said, though, I want to play a better team. I want to play in a more prestigious game in terms of fun to watch. And I'm sorry, that's the Alamo Bowl. The Alamo Bowl is my number one choice. You're
making me go, because I also say, I would say if it's a binary between Alamo or Texas and Pop-Tarts, I would say Alamo or Texas, so more U of H fans could be there.
Exactly.
But the projection, I'm just going to push back a little. The projections how it's facing Georgia Tech in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and that's a good fucking football team.
That is a good fucking football team. You're right.
I agree with generally like, okay, like, yeah, like online fans love the Pop-Tart Bowl, et cetera, but like, does it that exposure do really much to U of H? I kind of agree. No, but you're probably getting a good opponent at all of these, except maybe the Texas Bowl, Texas Bowl borderline, you might be getting like, I don't know, man, 6-6 Mississippi State or 6-6 LSU with an interim staff like K-State did a few years ago.
That is a problem.
But for the most part, you're probably getting like good teams. And I would say Alamo or Texas is my choice of that binary. And if I had to go subdivide it like you, Alamo Bowl is my main choice there because you're going to be probably getting a high level opponent there.
Yep. The Alamo Bowl is actually a pretty big bowl. I remember before the playoff, it was like, I would say, in the BCS era, I would say that was probably their third best bowl game in the Big 12. You usually got a Big 12 SEC.
It was usually a better Big 12 team. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a better Big 12 team. And then you usually got a pretty decent SEC. You probably got like their fourth or fifth selection in the Alamo Bowl. So, and it kind of feels the same way now. I don't even remember who played in last year's Alamo Bowl either to totally nerf my point.
I do. And you do, because a famous moment that you were very fixated on, Ralphie the Buffalo.
Oh, Ralphie the Buffalo. That's right. Last year.
It was Colorado. I want to say it was Colorado got like shithoused by somebody. Was it BYU?
I think it was because I just pulled up the Alamo Bowl website and there is the BYU coach on the on the front page.
That's right.
So
yeah, they beat him. They beat him by a bunch. I
will have
to
say that. Yeah, I do think that is the answer there.
But yeah, good bowl. I went in 2018 with co-host emeritus Dustin and his dad to a very entertaining Iowa State Washington State bowl game.
Think about that game, 2018. That's a pretty good bowl game there. Iowa State versus Washington State.
And this was when Iowa State was having a very good year. Washington State, I think, like set their school record for wins that year.
Yep.
As well, I think they were coming in with 10 or 11 and ended up winning the game to go to wherever it was. So before we leave the subject of football entirely, quick review of our picks from last week, a week where I did not retake the head-to-head lead over my co-host here. We'll just say, we won't name him, but one co-host, brave attempt at a sacrifice to use his cool streak to benefit the Cougar football team has paid off. Not all heroes wear capes, et cetera, et cetera. That sacrifice was my unsuccessful pick of UCF minus 1.5 points in the game spread or game total pick, along with my good old-fashioned unsuccessful pick of TCU minus 6.5 from our Big 12 games. But the only thing keeping me from a second straight 0 for week was my successful pick of U of H having over 1.5 rushing touchdowns against UCF. Bobby also had a 1-2 week, but did successfully take the highest points total game, the game spread or game total pick, by taking the game over of 47.5, though did unsuccessfully take UCF over half a passing touchdown and BYU plus 10.5 against Texas Tech, which allowed Bobby to slightly extend his lead to 265 to 245. With the Cougars off this week, we are only picking our one Big 12 game this week. Bobby, what'd you go with?
All right, so I said it was my spicy take that TCU beats BYU to set up a showdown. So give me TCU plus 4.5 on the road at BYU. BYU can't keep getting away with this, damn it.
It beggars belief that you watched me take them minus 6.5 against a swooning Iowa State team, choked that game away and lost it straight up. And you're like, give me this team in Provo where
you gotta have faith,
teams rarely win.
You gotta have faith, buddy.
Hey,
me and Josh Hoover, bud. Me and Josh Hoover, we're like this heading into this game.
Hey, I don't mind it. My lone pick for this week was actually a pretty easy one, not an exciting one. I'm taking Texas Tech minus 23.5 at home against UCF. We all saw what that UCF offense looked like last week, and Tech has one of the best handful of defenses in the country. Even if the Red Raiders aren't really a team that's going to light up the scoreboard against a pretty good UCF defense, I don't see this game in Lubbock being close enough for the Knights to cover, even with a big number. So going with Tech minus 23.5 this weekend against UCF. Funny coincidence, I did notice when I was putting this in the Excel sheet that I used to track our season picks and points, it did an autofill when I started typing in the minus. I actually took Tech by an identical 23.5 point line when they played Oregon State in week 3. Just a funny little number coincidence there.
That is funny.
Few more Cougar sports to talk about here tonight. We are going to go for the first time this season. We're going to take a swim in the pool. I've got on my goggles. Bobby has on his bespoke Houston blue Cougar swim cap. I've sprayed chlorine in the air of my condo so I can get the feel of being poolside because we're talking Cougar swim and dive this week. They were back in action previous weekend at a quad meet hosted by LSU, which also included, along with the Cougars, the swim and dive programs of Rice and Tulane. Kind of a typical early season slate of programs we'd see in a multi-team meet for the Cougs to compete against. Pretty annual to see Rice and Tulane specifically in the schedule. LSU, I know the last 3 seasons we've gone to Baton Rouge as well. We didn't preview this, but my expectation before this meet would have been for the Cougs to finish behind the hosts, a top 25 program, I believe number 20 as of last weekend in LSU, and then comfortably outpace the other 2 opponents. And thankfully, that is what actually ended up happening in Baton Rouge. Still early in the season, but I think really exciting. We got an NCAA cut level performance in both the swimming and an NCAA diving zones level performance as well from different Cougar athletes as well. Evelyn and Trekken building on her first place in the 100-yard backstroke performance from the last meet the Cougars were at, which was a dual meet at A&M. She finished in second in the 100-yard backstroke in this one, had a time of 1 minute and 29 hundredths of a second, which, as I said a bit ago, good enough to be an NCAA cut. You also had freshman Maisie Wollison on the diving side, had her first podium performance of the season, finishing second in the 1 meter springboard, which earned her a diving zones cut invitation to come. There were some key graduations, kind of focusing on the diving group for a second, from last year's team on a pretty loaded diver group. So it's exciting to see a freshman like Wollison come in and immediately perform in an event where there's good competition. And worth noting, you still have a really excellent diver in Michelle McLeod. McLeod reminded us of that by winning both the 1 meter and the 3 meter events in this one, coming off being named the Big 12 Diver of the Week, I believe after winning the 1 meter, but I could be wrong. It might have been the 3 meter when the Cougs had that dual meet against Texas A&M. You also saw this team take 2 of the 3 podium places in the 100-yard backstroke, where Elizabeth Jimenez and Alexia Duncan finished in second and third places, respectively. You also had Alondra Ortiz finishing second in the 200-yard butterfly. Fellow swimmers, Flo Peter, Leah Goupil, and Sienna Bruner also grabbed individual podium finishes, all in third in their respective events. Also, in the relays, the Cougs grabbed third place finishes in both the 200-yard medley and the 400-yard freestyle, both of the relay events that the Cougars were participating in. I would say my biggest takeaway that I came into this season coming off of finishing third at the 25 Big 12 Swim and Dive Championships, expecting this Cougar Swim and Dive team to be good enough to compete among the better Big 12 programs, even with some key graduations from last year's squad. And I would say what you've seen this week and in the other early season meets from Cougar Swim and Dive gives you pretty concrete evidence that you're not going to see a backslide. At the very least, that will still be the case, that this will be a team among the better ones in the Big 12.
Yeah, I think getting the NCAA cut in the first really event of the year is a nice thing to kind of get out of the way and set you up for what you're going to see for the rest of the season from this team.
And the Cougars will be back in action next week. They will host the annual Phil Hansel Invitation at the Campus Recreation and Wellness Centers and Auditorium, which I believe kicks off a week from tomorrow, so Wednesday, November 19th. I mean, another Cougar, I would say, later season sport, or at least a team that plays its principal season later in the athletics year, in action in the past week that was, and we will talk about that a little bit as I head over to Cougar Tennis Corner. Quick Cougar Tennis Corner this week as the Cougs competed in the last fall ITA competition, or their last fall ITA competition, which is the ITA sectionals. Cougars were competing at the one being held at A&M. You had the doubles pairing of Shems Doha-Zaguli and Sophie Schouten, who did well enough at the ITA Texas Regional Championships in November that they were invited to compete against the best of the best the region has to offer. In doubles, they faced the Texas Tech pairing of Murphy and Dmitrichenko. Ultimately lost this match, though. Credit to Sophie and Shems, really digging deep in the second and deciding set, forcing a 6-6 tiebreaker before, unfortunately, the Tech pair was able to ultimately win this one. This was the second straight season of a Cougar tennis athlete or pairing representing the program against at an event that is the best of the best that college tennis has to offer. You had Santa Strombaja qualifying in singles last year. And one of the clearest positive takeaways that I've gotten from the fall season is the fact that after a spring season where Cougs really struggled badly on the doubles courts, that we've seen Sophie and Shems have a really outstanding fall campaign and have likely established themselves as your number one doubles pairing. You've also seen, I would say, collectively a group of singles players where the floor seems to be much higher than it was last season. I think just maturity and experience, and we'll be adding to that group that almost entirely returns intact from last season, an elite junior player in the spring in Alexia Lavinia Pujac to that group. This is going to be the last scheduled event for Cougar tennis that I see on the schedule. Always a chance, I guess, the team could join a late fall event like they did last November at Rice. I actually went to that while I was out there. So good chance the next time we'll be talking about the on here is the release of the spring schedule, where we will see exactly how much of this fall progress translates to the primary college season.
Yeah, that's absolutely what you're hoping for, is that the floor has been raised, and that does translate into a really successful spring season for the Cougs.
So we'll go back to the world of college basketball for our final topic, as the Cougar women's basketball program playing currently and has gotten off to their own 2-0 start to the season. Putting this at the end specifically to accommodate the fact that during our ideal recording time, we have a Cougar women's basketball game going on. And Bobby and I have kind of been following along with that as we recorded, while obviously paying attention to the show we're doing here. And we wanted to do everything we could to talk about that game about as close to completed as we could get, which we'll do here a little bit later. But quick reminder, because we talked about the season opener right as it was concluding in our last episode. The Cougs opened with a 76-59 win over UT Arlington last Tuesday. Dominant effort against a non-conference opponent who had specifically given this team fits in recent seasons. No idea yet if this year's version of UTA is any good, but still very much in the any win is a good win kind of headspace with this team. And that is exactly what happened with, I think, pretty minimal drama last Tuesday night. More recently, the good times continued on Saturday evening as the Cougs outlasted UTSA 52-48 in a game that nobody would call an offensive masterpiece. But I can tell you from watching live, it was at least a good defensive effort, a good just players playing their butts off kind of effort. Outside of Kiera Merchant, who had a nice game offensively, we can call a spade a spade. The offensive contributions weren't good. It is looking like this team is going to be one, at least in the early season, that struggles scoring the ball. But Merchant was awesome. Like her teammates, she got off to a bit of a slow start shooting the ball, but unlike her teammates, Kiera was eventually able to hit some shots, win a respectable 8 of 18 from the field, including 3 of 5 from deep, hit 2 free throws late in the game where U of H just desperately needed points of any kind. Probably the most impressive stat for me, though, is the fact that she led you with 3 blocked shots, despite being one of the smaller players on both teams, and was one of 4 Cougar players with multiple steals. Coach Mitchell said in the postgame that Kiera was the most fired up player after the opener against UTA, despite her not having a big offensive game in that one, and talked about how she could have left for other places after the season when the new staff came in, but chose to stay because she loves representing her hometown. That should be catnip for Cougar fans, especially in an era where it's pretty common for players not to stick around when there's a coaching change. Merchant was one of those players that chose to do so and had stood out the previous seasons on 2 not very good teams. So was excited to see her shine in this one. Bobby, what did you see from this one that you think is worth mentioning?
Yeah, I kind of was just kind of looking at the score box, and I went back. I wasn't able to watch live and watch the UTSA game. I think some of the things that we've seen from the team offensively have been a little bit of a struggle. You kind of look at Amira Abdul-Rahim and you look at her stats and they look pretty good. Just kind of to start in the UTA game, I mean, she shot 75% from the field, 6 of 8. That's pretty efficient. Versus UTSA, though, that does drop to 4 of 12. So, not great either way, averaging 12 and a half and 7. But doesn't seem to be the most efficient. But yeah, it's the same problem you kind of ran into last year and the year before that, and the year before that is getting the ball in the bucket. You have the defensive effort there. If you could just figure out how to get the ball in the bucket, it's not from a lack of open, from open shots or anything like that. You're getting some looks. You just can't finish at the rim for whatever reason. It is one of the big bugaboos, it seems, with this team this year. Is that something that you figure out hopefully eventually? But I think you said it earlier when we were just kind of talking before we started recording, when we were just kind of talking about what we had seen in the game so far tonight. Is it feels a lot like football last year, where the record may not be much better, but you're going to be competitive in games. You just look better. Like, this team just already looks like a better basketball team. Like, they play basketball better than they did last year.
Little foreshadowing of tonight's Rice coming off. Offensive
Yeah.
woes are still there. But on the UTSA game, I do want to shout out a couple of the first-year veteran transfers in that one. TK Pitts and Amira Abdul-Rahim, who both had double-digit rebounds in that one. Each of them grabbed 4 offensive boards. You started out 2 games in a row of the Cougs winning the turnover and rebounding battle against their opponents. That, along with the fact that both of those completed games were sterling defensive efforts, that's why I'm like you. I'm still optimistic. I still think it looks better. The offensive struggles are real, but also shouldn't really be a surprise when you have one player who actually put on a jersey for this team a season ago out there. They're going to be growing pains. I'm at least taking it as a positive that was an almost entirely new group, that at least one of the 2 main phases looks pretty good. I mean, the UTSA one wasn't easy or pretty. Frankly, I was hoping for a much less stressful final minute or so, what the Cougs actually gave us, but the team found a way to win in a game that I'm not sure the last 2 teams would have.
No, I don't think they would have. I mean, only just to say, I think the team last year was good in close games. They felt like they were okay, but they were just never in any close games. So I don't know how they would have done in a close game. They were too busy getting blown out.
Yeah, had to maybe kind of when they hung on for dear life in the one Big 12 win, but yeah, not very many examples of that one.
Exactly.
Kind of heard it from Bobby and I's tone. It is not officially over, but I think you can call tonight's game against Rice a loss. Unfortunately, the third loss.
If it's not over, we're going to lose our minds on this podcast,
Okay.
and our friends over at various Rice podcasts are going to be losing their minds as well.
Yeah, you're gonna hear us freaking out, but unfortunately, nothing about this game has given me any indicator that the Cougars can score 12 points quickly in, as at least on my feed, 58 seconds remaining. And I mentioned it a bit ago. You won the rebounding and turnovers battle against UTSA and UT Arlington. You actually won the rebounding battle in this one too, and I think for at least the first half, you were maybe a little more competitive. I think the Cougars are finishing this one with about 6 more turnovers than Rice. So negative there, but not wildly so. I think the biggest problem isn't so much that you were turnover deficient. It's that you couldn't put the ball in the basket. And it doesn't even extend to shooting. I'm just going to read out various grim offensive stats, Bobby. You can just tell me when you want me to stop. Tell me just like, I can't take it anymore. It's enough.
Stop.
11 of 33 on layups, 18 of 33 from the free throw line. That's dude, and you're down by 12 right now. And I'm not saying, like, is it realistic to expect this team to make 30 of 33? No, probably not. But I don't think I'm asking too much.
If you look, here's what I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, man,
you have shot 6 more free throws than Rice has, and they've made 6 more than you have. That gets you halfway to the to the deficit here. And then you add in that they've made 4 more 3-pointers than you have while shooting the same percentage. If you look at these stats, this should be a tied game. But again, turnovers, what were those, Sam? 22-16. There's 12 points right there, or points off turnovers, 25-13. Okay, there's your 12 points. Then you add in the fact that you have 6 less made free throws than they have. There's 18. Like, you gave away this game.
Yeah. I
You've
think
made as many field goals as they have. As much as we talk about the woes and how bad this offense is, you've made the same amount of field goals.
Yeah, and give him credit. Like TK Pitts, once again, double-digit rebounding, got you 5 offensive boards. Mir Abdur-Rahim did not have a good start offensively, but I think has been actually one of the few bright spots for you offensively in the second half. It just, the thing that kills me, and I'm not going to just go out and single each player that's been a bad free throw shooter in this game. That's not 60. That's not an 18 of 33 because the Cougar post players got sent to the free throw line a disproportionate amount. Okay, like you've got career 50-60% free throw shooters up there. They're post players. Like, how do you think it's going to go? No, it's mostly guards. Like, other than Kateri Poole and Kayla King and Brianna Peguero, who Peguero did not have a good shooting game for, in this one. I think everyone kind of shares the burden here of just not making freebies. And I'm not going to overreact to this, even though I don't think Rice is a very good team, because I'm still such a believer long-term in Matthew Mitchell. And it's one of those, hey, anyone you gets a good win. And this is a team mostly built in April of May of this year. So again, like I think freaking out is not what you should be doing here. Like, there's still good stuff. Like, you still see this team playing a lot better than the last couple in some pretty key ways, but I think we've said it. This team really, really struggles putting the ball in the basket, and tonight was a pretty good display of it. And I don't know if it's like you're playing like the wrong player or something like that. Though Kendall Hunter did have a nice, I think, cameo off the bench. 4 fouls in 16 minutes probably limits what you can do with her there, but like the one Cougar positive in the plus minus and was an asset to you offensively. The 3 missed free throws, not wild about that from someone who's supposed to be a shooting guard. Just, again, I think everyone kind of shares the blame there. Nobody shot it especially well. I would like to think that's not something that can continue for the whole season, but that has been one aspect of the team's game that has been kind of rough early. I don't think I'm being unfair in the team and saying probably 29.5% of the Cougs possessions in this game have ended in turnovers.
It's not great, buddy. That's not great.
Just kidding. Actually, did I understand? Yeah, I think I understated it. 23% or 29% of all possessions in this game have been Cougar turnovers.
Ooh.
It'll get better, but
it will.
Some year one stuff here.
It's year one stuff. It's game 3 stuff. Let's see. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that this team's going to make a run and win the Big 12, but I definitely think you're going to see kind of like what we saw with the offensive line in football. It's going to gel a little bit, and you're going to be able to go, this is a better team than they were in November.
I agree. After tonight's game, the Cougs will go on the road for the first time this season to take on the SFA Lady Jacks in Nacogdoches at 6 p.m. next Monday. Hard to really say much about this year's SFA team. They've faced 2 non-Division I teams that I did not know existed before doing these pod notes, Bobby. Texas A&M, Texas Arcana. I'm aware of Texas Arcana. I did not know they had an A&M campus there.
I did, because when I had to go to work and I had to go to Texas Arcana to do a training, there was Texas A&M, Texas Arcana things like signs. And my coworker, I mentioned that I was in a college town, and he was like, "What do you mean in Texas Arcana? There's nothing there." And I was like, "Actually, there's a Texas A&M, Texas Arcana campus here." He was like, "Texas A&M, it's not there. It's in College Station." And I said, "Dash Texas Arcana."
Texas
Thank you
Arcana.
very much. So I did know it existed.
And Nelson University, the artist formerly known as the Southwest Assemblies of God, also on the SFA Lady Jacks early season schedule, won both of those by a pretty wide margin as you expect against a non-D1 opponent. this was a very good team last year. They won 29 games and won the Southland tournament to punch their ticket to the NCAAs. They graduated their leading scorer, Faith Blackstone, but returned all-conference selection Ashlyn Traylor Walker and Harmony Dominguez and Key Roseby, who both started double-digit games for the Lady Jacks last season. Something that did stand out to me is that SFA's sub-D1 opponents have gone to the free throw line in those games a lot more than the Lady Jacks, though not surprisingly, these sub-D1 opponents weren't very good at making those freebies. Just something to watch there. Maybe that a thing that necessarily benefits the Cougs as we saw tonight. Just something I noticed, just giving a quick glance at what SFA has been this season. Historically, the state of Texas's best mid-major women's basketball program. I mean, their coach went to West Virginia a couple seasons ago. A U of H win would represent a statement, not a season-altering statement, but would be more proof in the early season that Coach Mitchell and his team this team might be cooking something here, but not necessarily something I'm expecting. Probably not after tonight.
Yeah, for me, it was really hard to preview SFA. You did a great job. Just the funny thing, it's very rare that you see a team start with two non-logo schools on ESPN. ESPN
I mean, I get it. Maybe you just really wanted to play games in NAC and you didn't want your players to travel, but like you won 29 games last year and returned like 3 full-time or part-time starters and an all-conference player. Like why?
Yeah, just so
why
funny.
Are you so scared of like? Oh man!
And just to see no logo back to back, like they had a logo for Centurion with Oakland, like Oakland's after they play us, their next team Centurion. ESPN has
Defiance
that logo.
College, right?
Yeah, Defiance. I keep calling them Centurion for some reason. But just to have no logo means you are like NAIA and like NAIA adjacent, but even some of the NAIA schools have it. You have to be a pretty small school for ESPN to not have your logo.
I would say you're really getting deep there, SFA women's basketball. Bobby, that's all we got this week. Take us home.
All right, well, that is it for this week. As Sam just alluded, I want to thank you guys so much for listening. The new thing that I've been throwing in here, and Sam kind of threw it in to the start. Tell a friend if you are enjoying this podcast. We have a goal that we're trying to get to, and I think I said this on the premium. It's not something that will get us paid lots of money. It's not something that we need for sponsorship or anything like that. It's just something we want to do because we want to accomplish this. So the biggest way you can help us is with a 5-star review, or you can hit us up with a recommendation to a friend of yours. We would greatly appreciate it. And if we need to do some work to get that recommendation from you, you can reach out to us on social media at SH Podcast. On Twitter, you can find us at podcast.bsky.social for Blue Sky. And then if you want to just shoot us over an email, you can find us at shpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to give us a little bit of money, you believe in the work that Sam and I are doing and the hours that we use on research and watching U of H sports, you can throw a little money at us on Patreon, patreon.com/shpodcast. I think that's it for this week. Sam, what do we always say, buddy?
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs! Let's go!